Well, thank you everyone for watching Mogul Mowgli. And I am so pleased to be joined by the director and star of the film, um, co-writer and star Academy Award nominated Riz Ahmed, and then co-writer and director of the film, Bassam Tariq, who SIFF viewers may know from his documentary These Birds Walk, which played SIFF 2013, and then his short film Ghost of Sugarland, played in 2019. Thank you so much for joining me. How are you two doing today?
Good, thank you. Good to be here.
Good to be here. This is great to hear Academy Award nominated for my brother. Like I'm just so happy for him. So it just makes me really happy. Yeah.
So you two met in 2017 and collaborated on the screenplay. Can you talk a little bit about the origin of the film, from kind of inspiration to the script to the film we just saw?
I think things were quite
Yeah,
organic.
yeah, before 2017, I think we met in 2015.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Riz was working on the night of, um, yeah. So I think this was all quite organic. We just kind of knew. I just um, I always felt that he had such a talent as a hip hop artist, as a lyricist, and I wanted to see how we can kind of blend something like that in. And I don't think we really knew what shape it would take, but we kind of just set out together to really see if we could work with each other. I think that's really what it was for me. It was more of an experiment to see if it's possible for me to work with other brown people. Like that's kind of what it was. And yeah, I don't know if that answers the question or if that's too vague, but it's kind of the start of it. Yeah.
And what was kind of the origin of the story? How did you come up with this idea of a Pakistani rapper kind of suffer, kind of, I guess it's the prodigal son going back home and suffering, trying to uh, kind of negotiate his cultural heritage with the heritage of his homeland in his career.
I think we just kind of drew from some of our own experiences. We're both people that whose identity has shaped their art and whose art has shaped their identity. And I think that's what we wanted to explore in the film. In retrospect, it was that conversation between those two parts of who you are. And it's funny because we just kind of would have these great kind of chats. Really, Bassam and I, we didn't know until very, very close to shooting this film a few months out, really what this film would be. We were still traveling to Pakistan for research in February. The shoot was in April, thinking, yeah, maybe we're going to shoot some of it in Pakistan. Really, we're kind of finding it, and in a way, it's a very exciting process when you can find the film as you're making it and as you're preparing it. But we kept having these conversations, and things would come up like, part of what has driven us in our work is a desire to kind of, represent lives like ours and represent families and communities like ours. Hopefully not in a didactic or anthropological way, but just to kind of see some of those lives and faces and stories. But we kind of confront each other and go, well, you're trying to represent our people. When was the last time you went home to visit them? When was the last time you spoke to them on the phone for more than 10 minutes without getting all triggered and wanting to put the phone away? So it was that kind of that contradiction in the self, the fact that you might be spurred on by the same thing that you're running away from, that really kind of, that idea kept finding its way into our conversations and ultimately into the film. And that's kind of how it worked.
And there are obviously some autobiographical elements in the film. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, how were you wary about putting too much of your life in the film, or were you wary maybe of having people think that this was just like a, you know, like a film roman kind of thing, where it's just they might take it as this is your life, or were you kind of were you worried about a little bit putting too much of yourself into the film?
I think you can always feel quite exposing, and you always feel quite vulnerable when you make work from a personal place. But I think that's generally the work that stays with you and, you know, leads to your own growth as an artist and also stays with audiences. I think if people can't relate to the specifics of your experience, what they can relate to is the honesty, you know. So I think we knew pretty early on that we wanted to kind of draw from our own experiences and that would be scary, but that's why we should do it. But having said that, you know, I think the film is not a docu-realist kind of uh, you know, fly on the wall documentary. I think Bassam has elevated that the specifics of our personal experience with his artistry and with his vision, and it's, you know, has a very unique tone that ranges from musical to comedy to family drama to horror, you know, to magical realism. So I think that it certainly has a kind of um, it's inspired from life, but in the best way is also larger than life.
And Bassam, you grew up more in a Pakistani American background, and I read in some of the reviews while preparing for this Q&A that you were kind of a little, I wouldn't say surprised, but you noticed that there were certain differences between obviously the British Pakistani experience and the American Pakistani experience. Can you talk a little bit about what you found when you went over to Britain to shoot the film, and how some of your kind of more American-based experiences play into the film?
Yeah, I mean, I think just like a small historical thing is the British Asian experience, the Indian or Pakistani people have been in Britain for over a century, and they've roots with a lot of rights activists, with working class people. Like it's a different. I would say it's a different dynamic because I think generally the people that are here in the United States are um, people that have come from um, college educated backgrounds, or they moved here for college. So when they settled here, they ended up getting kind of middle class, upper middle class jobs. Um, and I mean, I would say that what's quite cool is because they've been there for maybe I would say 3 to 4 more generations. They've kind of built a really cool subculture, and um, there was something really empowering about that because I don't think over here we've had a sense of doing that. And a lot of us try to kind of emulate whiteness, or we try to perform elements of blackness, but we don't know necessarily where we fit in all that. But I think to use the model or to even see the British Asian experience as a cool map, or as a kind of like a way to for us to build something that also feels quiet, I think close to home, and also something that feels authentic. It's really cool to look at and see them as a guiding light.
So you two co-wrote the script, and Riz, you're in front of the camera realizing the script, and Bassam, you're behind the camera realizing the script. Was there any time during the filming that your kind of ideas of what a specific scene were were different? Like Riz's interpretation wasn't quite yours, or vice versa, or
I
were
mean,
those kind of
yeah, I would
worked
say
out
that
before the
actors.
script?
Yeah, I mean, look, actors like they're the ones that are like they're calling the bullshit on if things work or not. And Riz is such a great reader of everything, so he would be able to call, and he interrogated literally everything that was written on the page. And sometimes I'd be like, can we just say this? But it's great because it just makes you try to understand, like, okay, where am I coming from? What do I mean by this? What is the discovery in this moment? So I think because Riz was so intimate with the script as well, when there were times I didn't even know how to communicate a note to an actor, he would be like, hey, look, here's something that we're looking at. This is what we're trying to get at. And he would know how to also even communicate with the actors when moments I didn't know how to do that. So it was great to have him as like a partner in crime. And just another thing, like I'm not a British Asian, like I'm not from London. I'm a fucking like New York kid that's like sitting over there. I don't, like a lot of my slang, a lot of the stuff that I wrote in there, it's like, no, we don't say this. Hey, we don't say this. He was always very respectful about it. But I needed so much of his support, and also just all the cast support, because we had this like incredible rich British Asian like ensemble, right? We had Sudha Butcher who played the mother. We had Anjana Vasan who plays Vaseem, Nabhan Rizwan who wrote the lyrics to Pussy Fried Chicken, and Hussein Manower who is a spoken word artist who plays his cousin. So it's just like all these people brought such a richness to all these roles. So I was very blessed, I think, to have all of them in our corner.
Yeah, I remember reading that you said like the first time you did a table read, you looked around and it was all brown faces, and you had never seen that before. Bassam, you come from more of a documentary background. Can you talk a little bit about how you kind of approached your first feature film? I know it's one of the things I read that you filmed it in chronological order, and there were some reasons to do that because later on in the film, Riz has to go through some weight loss. But can you just talk about what your approach was to doing a narrative versus a documentary?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest learning curve was time, right? Like you have to make your day. And that's something that you don't have to worry about in documentary. And I think there's another element where I think I was always busy about creating the atmosphere of what it is, and I was sometimes less concerned what's happening in the frame. And I think that would take out a lot of the time in the day. And I think realizing that there's a very different way that you manage a set versus when you're managing characters or subjects that you're working with. So that was something of a huge learning curve for me. And just having just really talented veterans around me. Like everyone was more experienced than me on set. I said that the first day. It's like when I look around this room, everyone's got like maybe over like 100 or maybe even like like I think something like 500 years of experience over me, right? So I just had to really defer to people and just like really say I don't know. And I remember I even asked Riz, like I was asking about a director because Riz has worked with some of my favorite directors, and I think this, I'm not sure if you remember this, was we were in the Lahore airport and like one of our flights got delayed, and I think you worked with Jacques Audiard, and I was like, hey, what did you learn from Jacques? And you were like, sometimes he would say he didn't know. And I was like, oh my God, that's so great to like that I can just sometimes just admit something like that, and I think he gave me that permission to just say sometimes, hey, I don't know what to do right now. And I think we would sit there, we would, just kind of figure it out together. And that was something that I'm really blessed that I was able to do.
And Riz, I was listening to your interview with the BBC's Simon Mayo this past weekend, and one of the things you said you learned from learning ASL in the deaf community while doing Sound of Metal was being forced to communicate with your whole body. And I was thinking when I was rewatching the film this morning that I could see something of that in your performance in Zed, particularly in the hospitals scenes. Am I mistaken in that, or do you think that the experience from what you learned from preparing for Sound of Metal really helped you inform your performance with Zed dealing with his illness?
I think that what I think that actually Mogul Mowgli had its own process. I worked with this movement director, Polly, who's just the most incredible kind of yeah, she kind of helps you to explore your physicality really in performance. She worked with Rami Malek on the Freddie Mercury movie, for example. She's from a choreography background, and she kind of kindly came in to like help support that physical journey. And yeah, we kind of I built my own kind of, I guess, physical vocabulary for Zed and for his journey. And um, so the kind of the physical paralysis had an emotional root to it. So the way that one foot might be turned inwards, or the way that his inability to kind of to move forwards could be grounded in very specific kind of emotional circumstances, and how his physicality would change around different members of his family. So we kind of created this whole kind of grammar for how Zed moves or can't, and why. So it was kind of really its own process, and it was very intensive. And I think the weight loss really kind of informed that. It was something I probably wouldn't attempt again. It was very intense in that I lost 10 kilos in 3 weeks while we were shooting. And I mean, apart from what that does to you physically in terms of your energy levels, I think psychologically it takes you to very, very, very emotional places. It's strange to see the tricks almost the brain can play on you when you're in that state. And yet, I guess I hesitate to say, but it probably really informed and helped the role, because Zed is someone whose mind is playing tricks on him, and who's in a very raw and exposed place in terms of his energy levels. So I think it was actually there was a very specific process to this that informed this performance, rather than it being from Sound of Metal, I think.
Okay. Um, did you You talked about the coach. Did you seek out any other kind of folks who were dealing with these similar autoimmune diseases and learn anything from their how they were dealing with it?
Yeah, this is something that, Bassam and I kind of have pulled from experiences all around us for this. And so it's something that we're kind of both quite familiar with. And then also something that, yeah, we did a lot of research on, but something that, we spoke to doctors, for example, we spoke to people who've gone through some of this. But the thing that kept coming up was just this idea of like, no one has an explanation for what causes, so many of the conditions that people live with. And in absence of explanation, people, some people are looking at, cutting edge research. Some people are looking at more esoteric explanations. And it was in that we kind of found the heart of the film, was this idea that the body's turning on itself, the self-hate, the inability for the body to recognize itself if you have been taught to see yourself as almost an outsider. That goes to the core of what is, crippling Zed, psychologically, emotionally, and then finally physically, leaving him in this kind of limbo state. So I think it was that idea, which is an interesting idea that comes up in the film, which is that, some people think that autoimmune diseases are much more prevalent in diaspora, and racial minority populations, which they are. Some people think the reason for that is because, these populations live in a different climate to that of their ancestors, or have different diets now to that of their ancestors, and the body's reacting. Some people think it's minority stress theory, that you, as being an outsider to society, you always have to be slightly hypervigilant, so your immune system is always slightly on edge. And other people will take this, more spiritual, esoteric approach of like, well, your body's not recognizing itself. You don't know who you are. It's an identity crisis played out on a molecular level. So all these ideas, we just thought that's just fascinating. And of course, like, what a tangible way to dramatize something that's actually could be quite abstract otherwise, this identity crisis. So it was really satisfying to be able to dig into that. They feel like quite ideas that at the time we were making it were quite out there. Now I think even in the last few years, these ideas and ideas of ancestral trauma are more mainstream. So it's interesting.
Yeah, that tension really kind of hit home for me in that scene in the hospital where the father takes your Zed to be cupped, and you're exploring this kind of very, science biotech therapy, but then he is doing kind of advocating this more folk-based therapy. Which brings me to Ali Khan. How did he become involved in the project, and talk about working with him?
Just one thing that I would say about him is we were really hoping for an authentic Muslim Asian experience. And I think there are a lot of really talented Indian actors that are probably from the more Hindu experience, so they wouldn't be able to have the command of the Arabic, because Arabic is quite central to the Muslim experience. Like we recite those prayers, and I think Ali Khan was somebody that Shaheen Beg, who is our casting director, was a huge fan of. So I just FaceTime with the guy once, and he just stole my heart. And he was just so honest about what he didn't like about the film and what he didn't like about our script. And he was also a person of faith. Like he took the faith really seriously. And there were other people that we were speaking with, and the way they had looked at the faith was a bit like flippant, and they didn't really see how they would come into the character. And for me, it was kind of important, also coming from a documentary background, that this father actually believed, right, or had some semblance of belief. So he'd play this role in a way that I could be like, okay, I buy his performance. That'd be the one thing I would say. I think he was incredible to have on set. It was just great to see him and Riz work together as well. And I think Riz and him also worked together separately to get some of this stuff together. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to say, Riz.
Love the dude. So much heart. A big kind of South Asian TV star adapting to this zero budget, basically zero amount of time, quite intense shoot with these two, people much younger than him, really, that are trying to kind of like, push and pull him in all kinds of bizarre way, different directions, and he's rolling with it, and he's with grace, and it shows in his performance. And he was nominated for a British Independent Film Award for Best Supporting Actor, and rightly so. I think we were just blessed with a cast that was incredibly giving. There were many, many times where Bassam and I were like, I don't know, let's roll with this. It's just, the end scene of the whole film was one we made up on the spot, pretty much. Our ending was not working. We had everyone was like, we have to shut down now. We are over time. We have to finish now on the last day. And we were just like, just roll the camera, and we just went with it. And it's just a testament to him and really our whole crew and cast that we were able to make so many of those spontaneous moments work. It's really down to their generosity of spirit. They were like, all right, these kids don't know what they're doing, let's just roll with it.
Had you worked with him before, or was this the first time? Talk a little bit about building the chemistry between on-screen father and son, because you two work so amazingly well together. It's such a believable relationship.
I never met him before. I didn't know the guy at all. I wasn't even aware of his work till I met him, and then I checked him out. And no, it was one of those situations, I think, and I think it's a testament to Bassam, because Bassam is just someone, so many directors try and act like they know the answer to everything the whole time. And maybe he took my Jacques Audiard anecdote to heart, but on the first day, his speech was basically like, I'm going to make a lot of mistakes. Thank you for your forgiveness. And it just created such an open-hearted, unpretentious, approachable atmosphere, which meant that when Bassam, was telling you, yeah, I know this is how it's going to be, you believed him, because he wouldn't hesitate to say, I don't know really what I'm doing with this. Why don't we try some stuff out? So when those moments, which were, frequent, when he'd kind of bring us together and say, now this is the direction we're going to run in together, everyone would follow him. And he leads with heart, it's one of those things where the way something was made always finds, that spirit always finds its way into the work. And really, that spirit is set by, your lead actors, producers, and your director, first and foremost. And Bassam just created this environment of vulnerability. And so we all bonded. All of us just bonded. All of us were just, in this together in the best way that independent movies can, can sometimes allow for.
I want to ask about the music of the film. It's such a major part of the film, and it comes from Zed being a rapper like you, Riz, but also when he goes home, what we first see is his kind of collection of the Quali music cassettes. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Could you talk a little bit about the tension between the rap music part of the movie and the traditional, and kind of just, and Bassam, talk a little bit about creating the music scape of the film. I think, if I'm not mistaken, rewatching again this morning, most of it is actually diegetic, even though some of those scenes are kind of fantasy based, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I'll just say one little thing about the music. And it's actually it's kind of amazing, and a real shout out to both Paul Corley, who is our composer, and Paul Davies. The film's actually won a few awards in the music category, because I think what they did was they did something really great and really subtle. There is a score to the film, but we always try to make sure that it feels so embedded to the rest of the kind of the sonic scape of whatever we're building, that it can be quite missed. And I think it's also because we never wanted the performances to be underscored too much or underlined too much by the music. So we always had the stuff there, and it's actually there is a lot of it. It's just that it does feel very much diegetic. It almost feels like it's a part of it. But I'd love for Riz to talk. Riz does such a great job of talking about Qawwali music and also the connection between that and rap.
Well, it's really kind of charting in a way some of my own journey in this, which is, you spend your whole life thinking that you're running away from home, and you realize you're running back to the source code. You're running back to the DNA of it all. Qawwali music is a kind of South Asian rap music. I would say that artists like Aziz Mia, you'd kind of say are akin to artists like Jill Scott Heron, for example. in that, you know, what they do perform is a mixture of spoken word, you know, really kind of syncopated double time rap, and also singing. And they also walk this tightrope between the sacred and the profane, you know, of both kind of clinging to their cultural inheritance, but also kind of remixing it in a way. And so what's interesting is that, you know, Zed realizes that he can draw on this inheritance, that he can draw on this 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 ancestry that's available to him. And you know, I guess one of the big realizations throughout the whole film, excuse me, is that for Zed, you're not an individual. We're all a link in a chain. We're all inheriting the gifts and the curses of those who came before us. And we're all just a link in a chain that's supporting the next generation. And that's what he really realizes in the film. He thinks he's out there as this kind of atomized individual out there in New York, for, you know, forging a path forwards, only to return home and realize, actually, I'm defined by my inheritance, whether it's on a biological level or you know, musically speaking, where there is a template for our experience. And I think sometimes, excuse me, one of the big tragedies of migration is that all that knowledge and that blueprint of those who went before can be lost to you. You know, Zed is rapping about where you're from. You know, he's rapping about his displacement as a member of the diaspora, or, you know, writers like Sadat Hassan Mantor wrote Toba Tek Singh, who our character Toba Tek Singh is based on. And Toba Tek Singh is about displacement. Am I from India or Pakistan in the wake of partition? How do I build my home in no man's land? So, you know, if we, in that homecoming, there's an embrace. And that's an embrace that sometimes feels like suffocation and sometimes feels like a homecoming, you know, for Zed. And that's portrayed in many different ways. I remember, I think I said to Bassam that I think this whole movie is someone trying to hug you and you thinking that they're trying to wrestle them, you know? And so we have that, you know, even in the Quran teacher scene, that's kind of epitomized in that scene, really. Anyway, a long and rambling answer, but I guess, you know, nothing's new under the sun, you know?
Well, and you just brought up one of the things I wanted to talk about, which is Tuba Tek Singh. I found that aspect of the film was so interesting, just based on a kind of a narrative structure. Like, when does he appear to Riz in the narrative? The flower headdress. Could you talk a little bit about what? I mean, you already talked a little bit about what the idea means, but can you talk a little bit about what the idea came from, and what you kind of further develop what you see as his role in the picture?
Yeah, I think what's great about cinema is also like sometimes our ability to draw our own meanings. So what I'd like to say, instead of just giving my own thoughts, it's stuff that other people have said to me that they've responded to, particularly the face veil. And I think one thing what one of my friends said was that he felt like it's like it's hard for us to know how to approach our own culture, our own ancestors, that it's almost like it's veiled to us. Like we don't necessarily know how to approach it. And then someone else brought up the fact that it reminds them of this iconoclastic kind of part of our culture where we, for a while, we stopped showing faces, right? Or faces of certain illuminated figures were covered, whether it's Ali, the cousin of the Prophet Muhammad, or Prophet Muhammad himself, or other prophets. You wouldn't necessarily see their faces, or even other certain saints. They would almost have like a light quality, or their faces would be covered. So I think that was something that we wanted to show. And I think another thing is that people, like, it's also the garlands that you wear when you're married. Like when I got married, I had this garland over my face, and so did my father. And I think even Riz's dad had garlands over his face. So it's kind of one of those things that, you know, you can see it's somebody that's marrying themselves. So, you know, there's just a lot of different ways to I think look at it. And I think all of them are quite exciting, I'd say.
Riz, do you have anything to add to that, or are you? Nope.
No, also, I think it just looked really cool.
Great. Okay. Well, I think we're just about out of time, but before we go, I wanted to ask, what do you have next? Riz, what are we going to see you in next? And Bassam, what are you working on next? And when do you think you might hopefully have a new picture for us?
What am I working on next? I'm working on raising my kids, figuring out how I'm gonna like if I'm gonna homeschool them this next year. So that's kind of my next directing project. Like I'm just trying to be a dad and make sure I don't like, rock the boat too much with my family. So that's me right now.
Man, yeah, that's a really intense advert for kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, and Bassam's an amazing dad. I know because he was basically a dad to be on set. Weeping, I don't know what I'm doing. He's like, sorry, big dad, it's okay, don't well, yeah, I mean, something I'm kind of doing right now actually is kind of, in a way, starting my own family through my production company. With Left-Handed Films, trying to kind of create interesting work with amazing people like Bassam, and Bassam and I actually have a kind of couple of projects that we're collaborating on under the Left-Handed Films banner. So hopefully, in between his childcare, he'll be able to to create some amazing work for us all.
Oh, I hope that happens sooner rather than later. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for taking the time out to join us and do this Q&A for us. And best of luck to you, Riz, at the Oscars at the upcoming ceremony. Thank you again.
Cheers. Much love.
Thank you for watching.
Guys, thank you, everyone.